All right, bonjour et bienvenue tout le monde. On behalf of all of us behind the scenes here at Fourth Space and the In.Site Residency Planning Committee, welcome everyone in person or via Zoom to this guided conversation, exploring perspectives on sustainability. We have a huge group of panelists eager to chat with you all, which is fantastic. We've got 2 hours to work with, so we do welcome your questions and comments. But before getting there, I'd just like to let you know that we are coming to you, live from Concordia University's Fourth Space, which is, for those of you who aren't familiar with us, we are located on unceded Indigenous lands in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. And I'd like to signal that as caretakers for the lands and waters that we are meeting on here today, we are grateful to the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation for their teachings about the earth and our relations. At Fourth Space, we collaborate with our university community on the daily to connect people to the diverse initiatives, research projects, and dialogues that are in development across the university. So it's a great pleasure to take part in In.Site, happening all week, today being the first day. We are running this as a live streamed meeting. I'll put the link in the chat just a moment to the live stream on YouTube. So if you are joining us via Zoom, feel free to jump into the conversation if you're a panelist anytime by maybe raising your hand or jumping in if you're an audience member. If you have a question later on, we invite your comments as well. And those of you in the space with us, in order for the folks on Zoom to hear you, we'll have to get a mic to you. So if you do have a question or a comment later on, please raise a hand and one of us will get a microphone to you. That's it for me. It's my pleasure to welcome your host and moderator, Patrizio. Over to you.
Thank you. Welcome everyone. What a beautiful kind of celebration we're starting today at In.Site, our first edition ever. You know, I couldn't start without giving a huge thanks to everyone at the Fourth Space for all the work they do and how accommodating they've been. And our team, PK Langshaw, Claire Lecker, Sarah and Elizabeth. So let's make a little bit of noise for them. They've been working so hard. I hope everyone on Zoom can hear the applause. So that being said, you know, I think a big thing is, what does co-cogitate even mean? You know, PK tasked me with putting together this panel because she referred to me as a provocateur. So I'm going to hopefully provoke and, you know, not harass. I think we're all here to maybe learn together and ultimately have fun and maybe come up with some outcomes. But, you know, this is a place of mutual respect. So I'd like to thank you all for being here. Who am I? I'm currently finishing my Bachelor of Design here at Concordia. I've been a research assistant with Dr. Carmela Cucuzzella for the past 2 years. Outside of that, I'm a musician, artist, I'm a human, I'm curious by design, and I think it's in my nature to ask a lot of questions, which maybe would explain why PK wanted me to lead this. So co-cogitate. The Oxford English Dictionary description is to think deeply about something, to meditate or reflect. So maybe we could think of this panel not as a discussion or a lecture, but rather as a provocation. We can provoke and stimulate and journey through our thoughtful and studied connections to sustainability on and off campus in their many forms. And what does this all mean? You know, like, if we're going to try and grasp sustainability as a hyper problem or maybe a hyper solution, how close can we come to conceptualizing it? And I think this group is really representative of a lot of different people who are doing a lot of different things in a lot of different ways. So I'd like to welcome our panel. This is a photo I took just outside of you know, pigeons in their environment here at Concordia. They are important members of the community here. I've got some introductions that I'll read. I'll start with Dr. Rebecca Titler, Academic Advisor and Research Administration Coordinator with the Loyola College for Diversity and Sustainability. Dr. Titler is a forest ecologist by training. She teaches in biology, geography, and at the Loyola College for Diversity and Sustainability, where she is also the advisor and coordinator. I asked everyone to give me a short bio, give me something they're working on that really interests them, and a big goal for sustainability on campus. So Rebecca says that she's teaching biology, Introduction to Sustainability, and excited to meet students from across the university interested in sustainability. They're also planning the seminar series of the college and the Loyola Sustainability Research Center, hoping to explore, among other things, the issues of eco-anxiety and the intersection of sustainability and diversity research. In addition, I'm planning the annual Sustainability Across Disciplines Conference for March. This year's theme is Research That Matters, Sustainability, Biodiversity, and Justice in a Time of Crisis. The conference will bring together faculty and student researchers from across Concordia and beyond to discuss these issues. And your big goal for campus was you would like to see links between well-being and sustainability and access to nature really developed at Concordia. For this, we need to value our green space, foster biodiversity on campus, help our community to build connections, and get people outside. And you well exceeded your 10-word limit, but it was a really beautiful thing that you wrote, so I left it in there. Madeline Capozzi, an alumni of Concordia, working on the Value Collective and with the Office of Rules and Norms. During her studies, she was active in the zero waste movement, providing design services for the Dish Project and research for Sucker. She pursued international studies in co-design and research on co-creating with governments. She worked as a research assistant to Dr. Carmela and co-produced a web-based project for the Leonard and Ellen Bina Gallery. Currently working in the transdisciplinary art studio, the Office of Rules and Norms, and is an artist in residence with this year's Créer des Ponts. So something you're working on right now, unpacking the psychological/spiritual dimensions of behavior change and using art and design to create tools for self-discovery. And your big goal for Concordia, I wish we had a drum roll so I could just do the drum roll every time. Rent-free residencies for recent graduates to continue developing the project's ideas they came up with during their studies and bring them to life outside university walls. Dr. Carolus Riad, postdoctoral fellow at Carleton University, CEO of Enough Canada, who is online with us. How are you today?
Good, thank you for having me.
No problem, our pleasure. Dr. Riad is a former Concordia Public Scholar and a recipient of the Quebec Lieutenant Governor Youth Medal and CEO of Enough, a B Corp based on, quote, waste not, want not. And Carolus says, my team and I are currently working with the Laurier MacDonald High School in coordination with the English Montreal School Board, the City of Montreal, and the St. Léonard Ecoquartier to implement organic waste collection. The Enough team conducted a full waste audit earlier in the year with the help of some of their students, and we are now finalizing our plan of educational workshops for all students, which will be followed by another waste audit. Your big goal on campus, your big goal was to teach all students about sustainability and the climate via curriculum. We also have Maya Jane with us, who's an alumni, also working with Value Collective and currently working with Frigo Vert, I believe. Jane has worked as a farmer, educator, and coordinator at the Community Food Security Hub, Saint-Tropol-Roulant, merging urban agriculture, food distribution, community engagement, and resource commoning. Managed communications for Concordia Center for Creative Reuse, where she was previously an artist in residence, and researched community appropriation of vacant space in Montreal under Dr. Carmela Cucuzzella. Currently entering her 4th year as a board member at Frigo Vert. Something you're working on right now this year has been a big opportunity to learn about collaboration management of complex projects. Quote, I'm continually inspired by the potential there is in creating supportive and functional spaces for people to show up with care and ambition. And your big goal for campus, interdepartment planning and change making around the university's role in the ecological transition, adjusting our approach to the education we offer, the research we do, where we invest. Online we have Cassandra Lamontagne, who's the sustainability manager at the Office of the Sustainability with the administration. Graduated with an MSc in Geography, Urban and Environmental Issues from the Department of Geography, Planning and Environment. She's Sustainability Manager at the Office of Sustainability. Currently, she is co-leading a collaborative process to develop a sustainability living lab at Concordia, which will enable our community students, faculty, researchers, and staff to collaborate on projects that advance sustainability at Concordia. And Cassandra, your big goal was transformative sustainability by everyone, for everyone. So welcome and thank you for joining us. Dr. Ursula Eicher, a German physicist, Eicher has held leadership positions at the Stuttgart University of Applied Sciences and its Center for Sustainable Energy Technologies. She coordinated many international research projects in the fields of building energy efficiency, renewable energy systems, and urban scale simulation. She's currently the Canada Excellence Research Chair in Smart, Sustainable, and Resilient Cities and Communities. Currently, she's working on ABC, the Accélérateur des Projets Carbone Neutre in Montreal, where they try and get private developers to build or retrofit zero-emission buildings. And Ursula, do you remember what your big sustainability goal was?
I guess decarbonizing Concordia.
Concordia carbon neutral.
At least I don't contradict myself.
There are no contradictions here. Sébastien Aubin, a graphic designer, is one of the founding members of the Otami Design Studio that is dedicated to research, creation, production, education of Aboriginal digital culture. Currently based in Montreal, Tiohtià:ke, Sébastien is a proud member of the Opaskwayak Cree Nation in Manitoba, currently working on a long-term ongoing project, Cree syllabic font and multilingual representation in graphic design. And your sustainability goal was embedding and expanding Indigenous knowledge into visual communication, teaching, and learning. Next up, we have Thomas Heinrich, also an alumni, also part of Value Collective and the Bureau de Recherche d'Animation et de Concitation. Is that a dog?
Yes.
No, that's Thomas.
During his studies, Heinrich conducted research into vacant public space in Concordia's Institute for Urban Futures, material reuse for large urban infrastructure under Dr. Alice Jarry, provided design services for Sucker, and launched a research creation biomaterials project at the Milieu Speculative Life Biolab. He has 5 years of experience in the public consultations with the firm Bureau de Recherche d'Animation et de Concitation, and holds a certificate in design of ecological buildings from Solution Era. Something you're working on right now that's interesting you and inspiring you, learning about the natural world through Indigenous knowledge and building closer relationships to land and the more than human. And your big sustainability goal was getting students out on the land with a decolonial objective. Donna Legault, who's also joining us online, her transdisciplinary practice explores opportunities to acknowledge more than human relations. Her current research explores the capacities of algae at Concordia's Optical Biomicrosystems Lab and the Alyssa Piekny Cellular Biology Lab. Something she's working on right now is the potential for the species of algae to be a source of non-extractive energy, and that sounds fascinating. I'm going to admit that I know absolutely nothing about that, but I'm hoping to hear maybe a little bit more about it later. And your big sustainability goal, turning Concordia's indoor public space into more than human places shared by multiple species of organic life through the expansion of living plant projects like Hydroflora into Concordia public spaces. And last but certainly not least, we have Gabriel Tanzen-Dario, another alumni, also part of Value Collective and La Petite Maison sur la Prairie. Gabriel holds a BA in Urban Planning from Concordia and co-leads the development of Value Collective. He is currently project manager at La Petite Maison sur la Prairie, a project to build affordable community spaces for nonprofit organizations in Point St. Charles. He also has an extensive experience as an activist within social and ecological justice movements. Something that's inspiring you right now is exploring what it can feel like to be a friend to myself, to be present with myself at a given moment and appreciate myself as I would a friend. This is beautiful, by the way. I just wanted to say that. Ideally, a sustainable society and the way of life can make these kinds of explorations more available to us. In the meantime, I think this kind of effort to have a sustainable relationship with ourselves is important for the building of the world we want to see. And your big sustainable goal for Concordia, do you remember what yours was?
Divest.
Divest, one word, divest. Guys, I would remind you just to bring the microphone when it's time to talk. So let's hear it for our panel, everybody. Let's have a big round of applause. and a warm welcome to this maybe peculiar kind of event. I think I wanted to take some time with the introductions because I really wanted to demonstrate that we have here a really special group of, and maybe thoughtfully curated group of individuals who all come from different aspects. We have some working professionals, some academics, some folks from admin, research, some alumni who are out there in the world. Maya, Gabriel, Thomas, and Maddie are part of Value Collective, and I would just like to invite one of you to give maybe a brief, explanation as to what that is. There's going to be a lot of being put on the spot today. So Yeah.
Do we have to, yeah.
Yeah.
The Zoom. Yes, so thanks for having us. Value Collective, well, is a collective of us four and a growing cohort of people. Our work is centered on supporting and giving a space essentially to non-financial value. So we're interested in how a wide variety of activities of different forms of engagement in the city by a diversity of actors, whether it be artists, whether it be activists, people who have essentially like non-financially driven forms of work, developing support structures to elevate their work and give them a place that can be recognized through that lens, and essentially understand the kind of economy that happens behind the scenes that is less accounted for and that is less legitimized in a way. So right now we're working at La Cité des Hospitalières, which is at the corner of Park and Pine, around the Milton Park area. And we have a space there that we give to residents rent-free, where they can incubate their desired projects or continue on projects of their volition that respond to social needs, to cultural needs, to artistic needs, and these types of practices. So it's a bit of developing a framework through which to understand labor and work and kind of invite a bit of a paradigm shift as to how we understand the things that we value and how systemically we enable them to exist, pretty much.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'm just going to go back to sharing my screen here. Okay, so with that being said, our panel, let's talk. First point, semantic satiation. I'm going to say it again, semantic satiation. Does anyone know what I mean when I say that? Can anyone jump in? Have we heard the expression before? No? Nobody in the audience? Okay. Semantic satiation is a psychological phenomenon in which repetition causes a word or phrase to temporarily lose meaning to the listener, who then perceives the speech as repeated, meaningless sound. And I'm sure we've all experienced this in our own personal lives. Extended inspection or analysis, such as staring at the word or phrase for a lengthy period of time, in place of repetition, also produces the same effect. And I wanted to use that as an opportunity to open the conversation. You know, when we discuss sustainability at different levels, and we can perceive this here because I think we've already said sustainability 100 times. Is there a point at which these words through repetition lose meaning, almost becoming ornamental or ceremonial? And do we run the risk of encountering this when communicating our collective Concordia eco-message?
Can I start? Or
Anyone can start.
Okay. I don't think repetition is the problem, because sustainability, climate change, all these topics have been around for decades, of course. I would say 50 years or so easily, even in research. So we need to repeat it to keep it in our consciousness. But I think the problem is we repeat it. What's really frustrating, we talk about it and nothing changes. And I think it's more that creates the frustration, not even satiation. I mean, it's more frustration that if you think the facts are on the table, we know what we're talking about, but nothing changes. So for me, it's all about trying to push more action and generating change, because it's, as I said, it's not the problem that the words lose meaning or even importance. It's more important than ever.
So for you, the repetition is almost like a source of power, right, for the message. Okay.
Yeah, I wonder as well if maybe repetition is not the issue. A lot of the time I feel like the issue is co-option. Words like sustainability get co-opted by capitalism, to name a big word, by consumption culture, by the market economy, by branding and advertising. I guess what I'm describing is greenwashing, really. So that's where my satiation comes from. Like, hearing the word sustainability these days is like comes with that baggage. Like, it comes with my own cynicism about how able we are to really make change in a world that operates like this, in a world that co-opts words and concepts like this and turns them against us.
Yeah, I would add that I think it can be really helpful to have many different words that are pointing to a similar thing with a slightly different flavor. One example I would give would be like vegan versus plant-based. They're basically talking about the same thing, but they appeal to different people because they signal like slightly different values almost. Like veganism is very politicized. Plant-based seems more to appeal to people who are about the health side of it. But ultimately, they're kind of accomplishing the same thing, right? People are eating more plants and less meat. So I think it can actually be a good thing to move away from tired language, and as something that I try to do a lot in my practice as a form of like culture change. But at the same time, I think that can also, there's a dark side to that in the sense that like people can lose focus, and maybe it is easier to get co-opted. Yeah, I don't really know if one way is better than the other.
Hi. We talk about this in class, of course, what sustainability means and what it means to different people. And whether it means anything, it's easy to use it for everything. I think we need to be careful to qualify it and to attach it to action, as Ursula says. But just to think about it as consumers of words and of vocabulary as well as everything else, when it's used, how is it being used, and what action is attached to that, or not.
Hi everyone. My name is Sebastian. I'm going to try and give like an indigenous context to taking something that's owned by somebody else and using it for your own demise. I was working at Indian Affairs like in early 2001, which was a like interesting experience, and I worked in environmental sustainability. So this is a word that's being used for the last 20 years. And what I did there was be a policy analyst. It was the most boring job I ever did, but anyways, I did it. But what I did is that I studied the Species at Risk Act and what happens on reserves in communities, and how to sustain dying practice of like how to survive on reserve. Reserves are actually made to eliminate the indigenous person. They're a form of genocide, continuous genocide. Part of that, I mean, sustainability is a word, and we're talking about environmental, but us as a culture, as an indigenous culture that was from here and things been taken away from us, we've learned to share. And I mean, I agree with you in the fact that, you know, things are being taken away. But I think if communication is being done and words are being said and things are being shared, on the long run, we're sharing, right? We're discussing, either if it's through art or anything. Within the indigenous community, and I work a lot with indigenous contemporary artists or contemporary artists that are indigenous, depending on how I want to see it, they confront a lot the situation that are at hand within their communities and try to bring it out outside of the communities to bring a conversation, not to confront, not to be liable for the confrontation, but to bring on the conversation. And for us as an indigenous community, as long as we can talk, the changing of the guard, as we'd say, is that we want to communicate, we want to share, we want to have these panels, we want to be given a voice, or we'll take it, it all depends. But other than that, I mean, I think we should continue having these conversations. And I think if something is taken away from you, I think if you look at indigenous culture, it's like, don't worry about it, it'll figure itself out. That's what we do in Cree culture. I can't talk broadly about indigenous people because it's like saying I can talk for all indigenous people from like New Zealand, Australia. So I'm Cree, all right, and I speak in a very Cree perspective. So I'm very matriarch, and we have this term called we, which is like some people, you know, what's your pronoun? I say we because in Cree culture we have a very kind of undefined, non-binary cosmology. So everything is either open or very closed.
Excellent. So I'm hearing we're talking about words, we're talking about language, and words can be a source of power. Like Maddie said, they're almost like wayfinding, right? Pointing people, using to orient people towards mutual shared kind of goals or way of sharing. Cassandra, I'd like to ask you online about, this concept of satiation and over-communication, and, especially because of your, within the context of this panel, unique role in the administration of the university, what your experience is with the overall communication of Concordia's eco-message.
That's a really good question. I mean, in my role, it's something I do say or write 1,000 times a day. And it, of course, becomes difficult to maintain the same and assign the same meaning to it, consistently. I think, like others have pointed out, it's really important that if we're talking about it in terms of the action that we're taking, and not simply empty words, empty rhetoric. I think Concordia's gotten pretty good, pretty streamlined over the years of making sure that when they do communicate some of their efforts, some of their commitments around sustainability, they're always sure to point out what's being done and how people can be involved. So there's also like a call to action there, which I think is really important too. But it's difficult, in a university environment, we tend to be a little bit of an echo chamber, I find, like, especially in my work, but even I find just in the university context, sustainability is so important to so many of us here that it almost gives me a false sense of, representation of the outside world, only to find when I talk to a friend of mine or a family member that this is not a word that they think of in their daily life at all. So it's not just about how we're communicating it internally, but about how we're using, our considerable capacity to make sure that this is something that is being addressed outside of the university. And I really appreciate all the research being done, and especially the fact that researchers are learning all the time now how best to communicate the work that they're doing to different audiences. That's very important. The fact that we are graduating students who can go into the world and bring this concept with them, like Carola said, to have our students learning about this during their time here, I think is also very important. So I don't think it's so much about the word, but about, the changes that we try to enact in the service of sustainability.
Okay, great, thank you. Absolutely. I'd just like to say before that, for those online, I don't think that we figured it out. There's no need to raise a hand. I don't know if we talked about that. I think you could just jump in if and when you feel like discussing. So by all means, I'll pass it off to you, Thomas.
Yeah, I just have a comment that maybe points a bit to what Cassandra just said. I think thinking about semantic satiation for the term sustainability is interesting because, as has been said, it's a term that's been around for a long time, but that has also, I think, taken on different meanings ever since, I'm not entirely sure when it was first coined or when it was first popularized, maybe the 60s or 70s. But it's also taken on different shapes, different meanings. I believe it started more with sustainable development, and increasingly we hear less about that because, rightfully so, sustainability also questions development and the relevance of development. But I think my fear regarding semantics is that in one milieu, mainly maybe the more academic, rural, political sphere, the term evolves very quickly and the meaning that we attribute to it evolves very quickly. And we go from sustainable development, we go to sustainability, we go to, ecology, different variants, different ways of understanding it. And that outside of that circle, we're still having to explain to someone what sustainability is, even if that root concept that's behind all of this discourse has been circulating for decades. And so I think, pointing to what was just said, and the relationship between semantics and action is not just it's action, but it's also education outside of the usual spaces. And I think that's super important, because if not, you have one world that's constantly, ahead of the curve, and another world that, you know, has other concerns, more immediate concerns, or is, you know, still, whether it's a term, they understand sustainability in a very different way that is perhaps even more applied and maybe honestly more relevant than the way that we understand it.
Mm-hmm. So in that sense, there's almost like a disparity between how we are able to understand and explore sustainability depending on different areas, right? If you talk about the general public versus more specialized kind of areas of research.
Yeah, in a way, but I don't think that we should take that and think, okay, we should just, you know, better educate people. I think it's just important that we recognize that there are different ways of acting sustainably, whether you recognize it or not within that, you know, lexicon.
Excellent. Corrales?
Yeah, so I mean, just building on a couple of things here. So I mean, I'm going to talk about a few cautionary tales. So one is that obviously one of the things that was mentioned is how the words that we're using are being co-opted, and it's almost drowning out the you know, people who are actually raising alarms for actions. Raising alarms is probably the wrong word. I want people to be alert, not to be alarmed. But so we do need to be careful with these things and help people navigate and be able to differentiate between the greenwashing and credible voices. The other part is that sometimes we get bogged down in semantics where, you know, we go into all kind of rants about people who use the wrong words, and what that does is it intimidates a lot of people who would feel that I'm a novice in sustainability, and so if I try to engage, I'll be essentially walking into a landmine where if I say the wrong thing, if I use the wrong thing, I'm going to be criticized and all these things. So this is another thing that we need to be careful about. The other part is that it takes too much time. So, I mean, for one example, Concordia took 5 years to come up with a 5-year action plan for sustainability. And I remember being involved from the beginning, and we spent about a year or two just coming up with a definition for sustainability. And if you read it, it's a couple pages long. And I mean, outside of people working with Cassandra, there's probably not a lot of people that actually know what is Concordia's sustainability definition. And it doesn't really matter, right? So at some point, like, we need to move forward to act as opposed to spend so much time trying to come up with talk about semantics, essentially. Yeah, so these are the cautionary tales I have.
Excellent.
Sorry, my throat is a bit sore, so I don't know if I'm speaking very clearly, but
that's okay. We can hear you loud and clear. Then I'm starting to hear a lot of, I think will be a good segue to our next talking point. Are we getting in our own way? Can we think of a time when we've been our own worst enemy? The one person standing in the way of getting something. Like, do we become, in our own paths of research and action, have we encountered situations where we've become like our own barrier to entry? So what is the importance of unlearning as a means to learn further? When I say unlearning, I also mean embracing being wrong about something, learning new things, you know. Do we have a hand up? I didn't see.
Hi, this is kind of addressing your last point, Carol, but also maybe this a little bit. I agree, and I equally get frustrated sometimes with how the extent to which the Academy can spend forever discussing the definition of a single word, and that can hold us up in action. I think that there is a role for the Academy, though, to discuss the words and to be involved in the semantics. It's not the only role. Right, and maybe not always the most important role, but the university is a place to discuss ideas and to discuss theory as well as practice. So I think we do need to recognize that as an academy, we play both roles. We need to lead the way in terms of practice. We need to not let the semantics get in the way, but we also have a role in terms of leading the intellectual conversation as well.
This makes me think of semantics is one thing, but there's the way we work too. What's the workflow of the project, if you will? If we get bogged down with the definition of sustainability and we see that as a prerequisite for all the other work that needs to come after, if we treat it that way, then we're setting ourselves up for like a really long and arduous road. And this is something that I feel like we've had the opportunity to have a lot of experience with Value Collective, trying to strike a balance between working hard in the beginning to get it right, to make sure we don't like trip up and make mistakes later, but also recognizing that at some point you gotta like take the plunge and like you will make mistakes, and we can't let preparation and essentially we can't let the fear of failure and fear of mistakes prevent us from taking action. And I think yeah, there's a fear. There's like a serious fear there that we have. It's not seen as okay to make mistakes.
Do you think that's something prevalent in academia? Because I feel the more I move through my time at Concordia and kind of expand what I'm doing in Concordia, I feel that there's a culture of extreme performativity that exists. And I think that I let it get the best of me sometimes. But I'm wondering if that's something you see across the board, or are we talking within the environment of Concordia when we talk about this kind of pressure to be right and to have a perfect, the first iteration of something is immaculate, right? It's like...
Well, just speaking from the perspective of a former student, I think, yeah, I think it is across the board. I think it's cultural. I think this is a cultural thing, and it comes out very, very strongly in the education system. And I presume in academia, I can't speak for academia, but like the whole concept of having to, like trying to get an A is like, speaks to this issue. But I'll let some academics speak to it as well.
Yes, I would say the metrics of the whole academic system don't lend themselves to unlearning. And I mean, in the end, as you said, we work mainly with graduate students, so we produce, and with engineering students, so in the end, you need to produce new results against literature, and that's the academic way of doing things. So you review the literature and you try to go an incremental step further. But all this talk of transdisciplinarity and going into practice and involving stakeholders, that doesn't necessarily produce new knowledge, let's say on an engineering front. Maybe on a sort of social science, you could still analyze what the stakeholders do and how people participate and all these things. But from an engineering point of view, I think one of the problems is we have a lot of solutions, and instead of bringing those into practice and getting some credit for it, everybody is still saying, oh no, we need to go further academically, although all the stuff that we already have has not even been implemented. And I think that's a pretty fundamental problem that makes it very difficult for somebody who wants to get an academic degree to do these kind of applied projects, because it's a different type of knowledge that is generated, which I think we should really start to credit more, and not just the classical way.
And how do you think you could start to credit that more? In your position, right, in your practice, let's say. Would it be going against like the norms and standards of the entire community that you're a part of?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I have the privilege of not needing to care so much about that. So of course, the students produce papers, and it's part. As I said, we need to do it, but that's not the only thing. So I feel pretty free of saying I'm really interested to implement projects in the city and work with stakeholders. And in the end, I mean, if you just think about the implementation in a more systemic way, there is, of course, academic value to it, and analyzing where the barriers are and how you can overcome them, and using best practices to get some data. So I think all this is valid. It's just, as I said, if you stay in your discipline, it's very, very hard to credit for it. So I guess it needs to be more interdisciplinary from the beginning so that you can go to the edge of engineering and say, oh, I can also look maybe at user interfaces or implementation challenges, and then trying to make that step towards transdisciplinarity. And I think there's a lot of talk about it now on transdisciplinary research. So I think people want it, but I think we need to still work on it to, even internally, to give people who work that way just as much credit as 5 more papers published. So I think it's shifting a bit the whole paradigm of academic research.
Absolutely. And Carol, I think you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted, actually, I really liked what Ursula was saying about the interdisciplinarity part of it. So, I mean, I get the pressure of trying to get it right the first time, but from an experimentalist point of view, like I spend my time in the lab essentially putting flammable chemicals on fire, literally in an open flame. And so my training has been about experimenting. It's not necessarily about knowing all the answers or having all the answers from the get-go. And you know, I am a lifelong generator of bad ideas, and my experience is that the best way to filter out bad ideas is to try them out. And so I think this is really important when we have this interdisciplinary conversation, because my approach to trying things out I've come to learn that is very different from a lot of people in other disciplines, where they have to get all the different details beforehand and spend years trying to figure this out. And I think there's a place for both. I think it's really important to be able to identify both opportunities and the challenges from the get-go, and to also find ways to experiment with different solutions in a way that's time efficient. So I think there's a place for both approaches in a team environment. And this is something that we really try to have within enough. Now, the other dimension of this, which at the risk of getting a bit of trouble here, is that sustainability is one of these things where there's a lot of gatekeepers. And I think one thing that happens is that a lot of ideas get essentially faced by people who try to make it a lot more complicated than it should, right? So that you don't interfere too much on their work. And I think this is one of the things that how we get in our own way is when we convince ourselves that we need to get their permission to be able to act as a community and mobilize as a community. And so I think we'll do ourselves a lot of favors if we decide to realize that as a community, we're actually a lot more powerful than we can act together as a community and can make a difference.
Donna, you wanted to add something?
Yes, the idea of the academic practice as that academic practice is building on previous knowledge in order to gain recognition in the field, and is very much at odds with the notion of unlearning. And this is something that I've been struggling with for the last couple of years, working in a engineering lab, bioengineering lab, and a biology lab, where I spend every day sort of working with the processes for myself of unlearning systemically exploitive and extractive ways of thinking about the organisms and materials that I'm working with. So for me, that's something that I'm very much engaged with, this in my own practice, this notion of unlearning in order to learn, in order to free myself, and the practice and the collaborations that I'm working in, so that we're not necessarily as dependent on something that's come before, but a little more free to look at something differently and try to find a way forward that brings into consideration the lives, let's say, of the organisms you're working with, and how you could work with that instead of just extracting and destroying those organisms for the benefit of your direction forward. So Yeah, that's sort of the unlearning that I'm taking on in the labs, and so that's very much part of how I'm working with and thinking of unlearning.
Cassandra, you have your hand up, so we'll hear from you, and then we'll have to move on. This is my job as moderator, to look at my phone and say that we have to move on soon.
You shouldn't come up with such good questions then. Yeah, I just want to build a little bit on a few things. What Krolis mentioned about gatekeepers, I think is super important. You know, because sustainability shouldn't be thought about as a topic or as a field even, which it has been a lot. And that's some of the unlearning that I've tried to do as well. You know, we live in a time where this issue affects everyone. And so everyone is part of it. And it's not a partisan issue. It isn't even something that someone like me can take ownership of because I studied it and because now I work in the Office of Sustainability, right? Like, this is about the world that we want to create, and there's room for everyone at the table and for all their unique contributions. You know, in our office, most of our programs are actually just about creating pathways for our community members to get involved and to come up with their ideas and trying to help them make that happen in a way that makes sense for them. So I just, you know, we have so many people at Concordia doing these very unique things, but in a way, you know, Rebecca kind of said if sustainability is everything, then it's nothing, but it kind of is everything. So there is so many different ways to do it, to get involved in it. And that's why I feel like, you know, we've got the people who are working to make our operations more sustainable. And we've got, you know, community members, student projects, and others who are trying to, you know, create really cool, innovative things that can, you know, revisit how we think about sustainability while making our campus more sustainable. You know, we have offices providing a very safe and inclusive community space for people. We have people decolonizing the way that we approach the university, you know, researchers performing studies that'll take our impact out beyond the, you know, the campus boundaries, and of course our students who are basically going to be really advancing what they learn here and extending that into everything that they do when they leave. So it feels like an all hands on deck kind of situation. Definitely not something that should ever be gatekeeped. And you know, it can't just be the administration creating these pathways for people. Like, it needs to be coming from everywhere. And I also, you know, I can't get away from this definition thing either. So I'm sorry. I just think too that it is important how we define sustainability, but we have, you know, we have limited what we can do in sustainability a tiny bit by defining it in a certain way. I think maybe some of the learning I've been doing is about my own definition of sustainability. And, you know, just like the Concordia definition, which Carol pointed out, did take a nice, healthy, long year to develop, really rests on that 3 pillars model that, you know, concentric circles, environment, society, economy, or planet, people, and profit. And this is a great model. It's gotten us pretty far, and I think Concordia has done well to really make a lot of commitments and drive a lot of initiatives that address those 3 pillars. But it's a small definition in a way, because it doesn't, you know, it doesn't integrate wellness. You know, Rebecca was talking about wellness, and it doesn't consider you know, care or reciprocity, you know, the way that Indigenous communities have always done, and, you know, from which we could learn a lot. And that might really change the way we approach things at the university if we really connect what we think of sustainability to values, you know, as humans, as caring humans who have a responsibility, who want to be able to act in a reciprocal way, and to, you know, act as stewards in a way. So I would say those are my 2 important unlearnings that I've done as well.
Okay, thank you for sharing. I will move on to our first group activity. I call it pros and cons. I have a picture for everyone to look at. This was taken last winter in the EV building. This is a recycling, compost, and landfill sorting structure, which is covered in LED screens. I could show you what it looks like from behind. I took this picture completely independently, not knowing that I would, in 9 months, host a panel where I would get to complain about this. That's the back. So this makes me feel a certain way. It would be very easy for us in this group, I think, to outline all the cons here. So I'm challenging someone to say something positive about this, about maybe its didactic qualities. Ursula, were you already reaching for the microphone? Take us there.
I mean, that's, of course, a bit of an overkill of having sort of panels and then some boxes where you still manually do what you want. Where
I
you put your
said something positive.
No, and I'm saying this is just the start, and so taking it one step further. I mean, the smart bin projects. In the end, this will all be automatic or electronic, and it could lead to better separating waste at source without the user spending lots of time of figuring out where to put the right materials. So it looks a bit, as I said, it looks a bit like this one looks an overkill, but I mean, if it's done in a smart way, I think we need much more separation. And it depends how good the users are. You could educate them, or you, as we often do, we have machines helping you separating the materials. And so the full electronic version, then the materials even get taken to the right place, and not in the end somebody who collects these bins all throws them together again. I've seen that not at Concordia, but in German universities. So there was this separation, but then the cleaning persons just threw it all into the same bag. So I think there is a need to getting these, especially this resource separation, much better organized. And so I think that could be a first step. It looks like an overkill, but if it's done really smartly, it could maybe improve things.
Okay.
So I'm not so pessimistic about the technology solution. If it's done the right way, and of course it shouldn't consume more energy than it ever gets back out. But
I guess for me it's just hard because, and maybe this is from being in design and and working with Carmela and having my mind altered in the past 4 years of my life, but I can't look at an object and not see the cost of it on all fronts, of extraction, of transformation, and especially when having something like this screen technology, which I'm pretty sure was just a static image as well. It seems, Cassandra, I see. First step, and we're talking about behaviors.
The new ones have image recognition, and they tell you where to put it.
Okay. So Ursula was saying, because you didn't have the microphone, Dr. Eicher was saying that the new ones have image recognition. Super interesting, great intersection of technology and this kind of way that we can touch on behaviors. Cassandra, I know you have your hand up. I do have a specific point about this that I want to ask you. And I swear I'm not attacking anyone in any way. But I just want to come back to you in a bit because I want to hear from Rebecca and then Maddie first.
All right, thank you. So there isn't positives, right? You want the positive? The positive here is that there is an educational component. The wonderful display that, Caro, I'm guessing you probably had something to do with putting in the cafeteria here in the building where we are a few years ago. I haven't been downtown very much lately, where there were actually things stuck to the wall, right? There was a big cardboard panel with, the coffee cup stuck and it goes here, and the chip bag stuck and it goes here. So we are teaching, we are a teaching institution. We're teaching people about what they're using and where it goes, and that, these things are going to the landfill. Maybe there are some implications there. I mean, I'm pretty sure that was the intention here. Yeah. And if we're just automatically sorting stuff, then we're not getting people to think about what they're using and what they are contributing to in terms of waste. Now, it could be better in terms of education, and in many other ways. But, but I'm fairly certain that that was the intention to begin with. That's my positives.
I want to point out the positive aspect that somebody came up with this because they cared about waste and wanted to see things sorted effectively, and this was what they thought would do that. And they did it. They actually made it happen. So while I think it's important to be looking at how things play out and understanding maybe where things went wrong and how we can do better, I'm gonna kind of cheat right now and circle back to the last question and just kind of slip my comment in, which was that kind of building on what Gabe said, that it's really we have this cultural issue around making mistakes, and we don't really have much to catch people when they fall. And there's this strong sort of current of there's a lot of words for it. Call-out culture, political correctness. I've heard the term rigid radicalism. It's basically words that refer to this culture of roasting almost, that I think lead to situations where we take 5 years to come up with a definition of sustainability because it's so scary to make a mistake and get put on that roast. How do we make it easier for people to do things that they care about, even if they're gonna do it wrong or they're gonna make things worse? Is it is it better that they don't try? How do we create a culture where people feel safe to make mistakes, right? So, but at the same time, I think where this call-out culture comes from is that things were just so, this is my speculation, things were just thrown down and people got so excited about things so quickly, for I don't know, the 20th century, people built up all these crazy buildings, this is the best idea ever, everybody agrees, and then suddenly we've gone however far in the complete wrong direction, and it's whoa, all right, whatever we do now, we better get it right because, the clock is ticking to demise, it's scary. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's really admirable that this project happened. I think it does say something about cultural values, maybe a technocentric belief in how we need things to change. I don't know if they really had what kind of designer was involved to say that all the bins should look the same. Come on, didn't someone come up with that solution however long?
I feel
now I'm going
we're
into
in con territory.
Damn.
And you just circled back to the last question, so that's 2 strikes right now. Cassandra, let's hear from you something positive about this. What can we call it? Group? What are we going to call this? It's our didactic collaborative trash sorting.
Okay. I honestly see so many positive things about this, and maybe it's because I know the group who developed this, and they're very smart humans, very passionate about this at Concordia. But also, this is an experiment. We talked about the importance of experimenting and piloting new things, and the fact is we are facing a contamination crisis in our waste streams at Concordia, just as we are outside of Concordia in Montreal and elsewhere. And so this was, with this help, we can study this. We can see whether the waste stream is cleaner or less contaminated using bids like this versus our traditional ones that have signage. And people tend to kind of unsee signage sometimes. There's something about that. So I think it's very interesting in that it clearly tries to get to the heart of a big problem at Concordia. We all know how confusing it can be to sort our waste properly, even those of us who've lived in Montreal our whole lives. And now can you imagine incoming students who come from a completely different province or country that have, totally different waste sorting laws and systems. So, the idea is to give people as much help as they need to make the right choice, because we want to reduce our contamination rates and properly divert our waste. To the point that we actually have humans, right? We actually have humans standing at waste bins at our events. We have a program that does that internally at Concordia. We also have enough that Carolus leads because we recognize how important it is that people do this right, and that there's an educational component that we don't want to miss out on, right? So looking at the images here, I know what these are. I can clearly see that there's some of the items that are most frequently missorted at Concordia. So you can see there was some logic there behind what they wanted to put up and teach people about. And as for the energy use, all I can say is I think they thought about it. They use those black screens, which give off a lot less, which use up a lot less energy in their LED screens. But yeah, I think it's a good initiative, and because they're studying it as an experiment, we're going to actually have those results, and we'll know if it's actually better for people.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for weighing in with some positive about this. I appreciate that. Carol, I know you have your hands up, but I'm gonna have to moderate this conversation and move us along because we're running a bit late. I mean, this is a good maybe segue to talk about. It's something I wanted to hear and kind of listen to some dialogue on. Was maybe dealing with our blind spots. I think for me, every day I write the book on my blind spots. You know, every day I come to understand more about this, about who I am and the things I don't see. And my own journey through mental health showed me that recognizing something, being conscious of a behavior or something is the greatest way to change that behavior, if that's something you want to do. So, and you know, for me, I said I'm a musician as well. I was in Denver this weekend for a show. I had one show in Denver, and we flew to Denver for one show. And we stayed and we rented a van for one show to go to Denver. So like, I'm not immune. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm doing everything at my absolute capability to be, and maybe this comes back to being this idea of being perfect or being kind of like infallible. Like, it's okay to be wrong. You know, I'm very privileged that I'm in a situation where I can do those things, but they don't come without some concern and some internal dialogue. So I just wanted to see everyone with their own experiences, you know, can we ruminate a bit on this, on our own blind spots as we've come to understand them and maybe how we've dealt with them in past experiences?
I mean, it's a big one for me. My blind spots were kind of taken away from me like a long time ago because of residential schools, colonialism, institutions, telling me what to do, how to be, how to act. Fortunately, I have elders in my community that I go see. So this is where people that I would take outside of like to not be in my blind spot anymore. So take reference from people that actually lived something, made mistakes, tried things, screwed it up, tried again, screwed it up, tried again, and tried again. For me, when I teach class, I really believe in mistakes. Make as many mistakes as you should. If you want an A, you'll get an A, but in real life, you'll never get an A. You'll always be happy or unhappy. That's just life. If you want an A, good for you. That being said, in Cree culture, we do thrive to make mistakes. And if we don't do it correctly the first time, we're told by our elders to take it and throw it away. Unless you think you really believe that what you did is the most important thing, then you give the first thing that you've ever made. Let's say, for example, a lot of beaders, this is what they do, people that do beadwork. Their first beadwork they have to give away. I went back to the land. I went back to living in cottage country for the last 2 years during the COVID. Build a garden, tried to be self-sustainable, you know, do all these things. But obviously, I have an iPhone and I have a Macintosh and all these things. And I need electricity and internet at the cottage, or unless I can't pay for things, or unless I just go completely off grid, which sometimes I really feel like doing. But that being said, going back to the land made me reconnect with things that were outside of me, things that were taken away from me. So I did traditional, I was taught traditionally for like 4 or 5 years with medicine men. So I learned from these people how to cure, how to defend myself, how to sustain myself, how to sustain my community as a long haul on the immediate, not through conversations, not through panels. Not saying that these are not good, because I did say at the beginning that these conversations need to be had. But my blind spots I'm just there's something that are gratifying for me now. There's something that like help me to deal with my past. That was obviously like we called like generational trauma, and if you want to talk about that, we could talk about. But I mean, I'm okay. I got raised pretty good. My parents were pretty fun. I did powwows, so my grandparents still spoke the language, but I don't. So I'm learning my language through my design practice and through dealing in other communities that are from indigenous, other indigenous communities in the art world. So slowly and surely, I'm trying to see where I can instigate or have a rapport with technology based on my culture. Where can I bring my culture further, right? My sensibility towards my culture and the sensibility of a culture that was forced upon me. And what I really like about that is that it's always in practice, it's in motion. I'm there to make a mistake. I have no idea what I'm doing, and that's what I like. So, I mean, how do I have dealt with them in past experience? I just like trial and error, over and over again. That's it. I mean, and then I have elders, we have people that we could go and see. And then if we're talking about education, like you read a book about a person that died 400 years ago, I mean, there's so much you could do. But I mean, when you see people that actually put it in practice, feel really good. Like the Pueblos in New Mexico right now, they're like relearning or reteaching their traditional ways of like actually farming the land, and they're getting money to do all these things, and how they did it traditionally and how it helped the environment at the same time without not taking too much. Yeah, we tend to take too much.
Okay, so thanks for that. I want to put in a completely different perspective. I love to be in the city, and I love urban life, so blind spot for sure is that I basically never experienced much of nature. So, and I don't even feel the need because I always lived in a city. So, and coming back to what you said, I mean, of course, I also enjoy all the amenities of modern life, including flying somewhere, and same thing, whether you do it for a band trip or whatever the reason might be. And in a way, I still have the probably pretty technocentric hope that we can solve, for example, the climate crisis by just going fully renewable. That's what I'm working on, and I still firmly believe that if we would get it right, going fully renewable fast, we can probably continue this consumerism. And it's a bit of a, so I think that's very interesting debate, because one of the reasons that nothing changes is because people, at least the ones who have the opportunity, love that kind of life. They don't feel terribly deprived of connection to the land, for example, because you never experienced it. And so in a way, I still have this hope we can maybe solve this problem by technical solutions. And maybe that's wrong. Maybe there's just not enough resources on the planet, and if we continue consuming as we consume it, it won't work. But I haven't really seen a really convincing study which shows that it couldn't work if we close all the loops. So we have a fully circular economy, we have a fully renewable economy. Then I think at least the climate problem, not all other problems, but the climate problem can be solved. So, and that I think this sort of maybe a bit unrealistic hope is probably a bit of a blind spot.
Like your own, not the idyllic nature, but like to be a dreamer almost. Are you saying that is a blind spot? Do you know what I mean? Like if you have a very idyllic outlook on how things could go, and I mean this is in direct contrast to our culture of climate anxiety and climate gloom, concepts like solar punk, where it's just brimming with optimism that we have is that a blind spot? Do you know?
Well, as I said, I think it can be done, and I'm not frustrated at all. It just takes too long. There's powerful lobbies against it, but I clearly see a solution to this. It won't maybe solve everything, and it might still be too much resource use, so maybe we can't close all the loops, but in principle, I don't see why not. And yeah, but it still leaves that question open of how do we want to live and what is a good life. So is it really this urban, hyper-hectic, flying the weekend? is that the good life? I mean, I like it, but it's maybe not, it's probably not one solution for all, but yeah.
Okay. And Carol, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, so I'm an engineer, so, and it's very easy for all kind of engineers to have one blind spot, which is like technological fixes, where we think technology is going to fix everything, but fundamentally the climate crisis and sustainability are social issues that require social solutions. Yes, it should be complemented and supported with technology. But some of the things that Ursula was saying, for example, when it comes to circular economy, it is a social transformation that as a society we need to consume less, and we need to be able to do our sorting better and these things, these kind of ideas. And then the other blind spot that I want to talk about is when it comes to the wellness and mental health part of stuff, where there's all kind of pressure to. This is an expression called toxic positivity, where there's a bit of pressure where you have to kind of say that you're okay when you may not be. And I think it's almost forcing the eco-anxiety that exists right now into being a blind spot. Sorry, Patricia, if I can pick on your last question a little bit. At the beginning of the introduction was, this situation that has some few problems, and the question is, can you point out a positive, right? Sorry, I'm not trying to criticize you, but it's sort of like this kind of an idea of having to put a positive spin on everything. Some things you should be able to rant a little bit about, right? And be able to express yourself about. And when it comes to anyway, so I'm gonna stop here. But yeah, so I feel like technological fixes and trying to put a positive spin on a lot of things when it comes to sustainability, which is a big issue that causes a lot of climate anxiety, I think can be problematic.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I don't mind being criticized. It's like, I probably wouldn't be here if I was afraid of being criticized.
No, sorry, I wasn't.
Thank you for prefacing that. No, it's okay. Thanks for sharing. We'll move on.
Can I just jump in real quick?
Of course, yes.
Yeah, cool. It's super interesting to hear what everyone's saying and like what blind spots brings up for them. I think when I first read this, it made me think about learning and unlearning in a way. And I think blind spots have everything to do with like what you're exposed to and your worldview and your education and like the type of learning you're doing. And my first response to this is like almost like a call to remain open-minded and humble in a way. Like none of us know what we're doing. That's just like the only truth. And there's something to be said about just recognizing that through your whole journey. Like as you become the expert in something, even then remaining humble and recognizing that there'll always be blind spots, and that I think and then the second prompt, when like how have I dealt with them personally in the past, I think about like my university education being so transformative, just like you said, like your entire worldview for years, and how much potential there is in education, and even in experiences too. Like I really related to what you were saying about taking a moment to actually be doing things tangibly, not be just talking, and the amount that is learned in doing and experiences. And a big one for me has been getting to know like the living world around me. And truly, like in the last year, I'd say that has been incredibly transformative in my relationship to sustainability. And I think about like what I was thinking maybe 2 or 3 years ago even about the topic of sustainability, and there was tons of blind spots because I hadn't experienced something. So that's what comes to mind.
Thank you for sharing. That's a good segue. I'm sorry, Rebecca. I just can't swing it right now. But we can keep this conversation going because there we go. Everybody's finding a good way to circle back. So we've been talking a lot about being wrong, and then I think somebody said echo chamber before. It might have been you, Maddie, but it's time we air out this echo chamber. Thinking of academia as a kind of microcosm. Oh wait, by the way, do you know what kind of greenwashing that is when I just put a picture of some nice nature around something that might not have anything to do with what I'm talking about? It's called executional greenwashing. We see it all the time. I learned that last week. Thinking of academia as a kind of microcosm, it can be really easy to fall into places of like-mindedness or homogeneity. You've already got your hand up? Okay. What can we do? Oh, let me finish the question first. And somebody, Maya, I think you had mentioned, I think maybe that was you, get our hands dirty. What can we do to step outside and get our hands dirty in the world around us? And I think we're going to hear from Rebecca
I'm a
first.
fast reader.
I'm a slow talker, so it's okay.
I got the questions in advance. Okay, no. So actually, this fits with my last point.
No, it's good. It's good.
But I have to say, I am so privileged to be in a learning community, and the students challenge us all the time. My PhD supervisor, Lenore Farrick, used to always say the best ideas come from students because they're not yet steeped in the paradigms, the newest ideas. Getting our hands dirty, we need to open our minds and listen to each other and allow ourselves to be questioned, regardless of the hierarchy that is kind of old school embedded in the academic environment. I could talk a lot about experiential learning, et cetera, that we do at the college as well, and actually getting our hands dirty, of course. But to me, that listening, that ability to hear the questions, to understand where the roots of those questions come from, to hear different input, different disciplinary perspectives, but also different personal perspectives, and really hear and take them in and allow them to change your knowledge, your opinions, yourself. It echoes. Yeah, that's how we need to get out.
Thank you.
I can say something to that. I mean, I think the problem is we need to become pretty active to step outside, because the outside world doesn't knock on our doors and ask academics, so how can you solve problems of whatever, building retrofit, sustainable mobility. I think we have a lot of solutions, great ideas, but nobody comes and asks. And I think and it's a bit frustrating of saying, why do they not come to us? I mean, it should be perfectly obvious that there's bright students, great research, and we have the time also to dig into these questions, but it's just not an established pathway. So it takes a lot of effort, and I spent the last 3 years since I'm here trying to do that. And I mean, COVID didn't help neither, but to get the connection to external players and say, well, I want your question. Then they say, well, we don't have any question. You are the researcher. You propose what the problem might be. And I find that very strange. You always expect organizations, whether it's the city, the transport authorities, the real estate industry, to have questions, and we would be very happy to answer them, but that's not how it works, strangely enough. So because the worlds are so separate. So I think you need to make this effort pretty consciously of saying, well, okay, let's talk, and then I find out what your questions are, and I make an offer of answering them, and then they say, oh yeah, that might be interesting, and then let's talk again, let's do a little project. But it takes a lot of effort, and because we're not really forced to do it, because there's no, as what I said at the beginning, no real value given to us, because it might not result in a publication. Most people just don't do it. But I think that's, for me, is the key step, so that we, and I heard about, I think it would be a great idea to have a kind of impact assessment framework. We started to talk about that, and because that would maybe allow to credit that type of work.
I think, well, I find the question interesting for me personally, having graduated about 1.5 years ago now, or 2 years. This last period of time in my life has been extraordinarily educational after leaving school. And I think something that I feel at this point in time, having one foot or maybe a toe in the academic world and the other toes out of it, is how academia is not only a world where I don't think that there risks being like-mindedness or homogeneity. I think there maybe is to a certain extent, but within academia, there are enough researchers, there are enough students, there are enough people to have a diversity of opinions. what I think is that there is a risk of having a single way of knowing. And I think that is something that is very easy to slip into. I mean, there are ways of knowings in every single circle or demographic or culture. But I think it's acknowledging that academia is a culture and that there is a way of approaching issues and developing questions and answers. And to point to this example of coming to people in civil society or developers or people who are not within the academic world and wanting their questions or asking them questions, maybe those questions are just simply not relevant to them, not because they don't point to something that they didn't think of. I don't know if this is the case exactly, but that way of simply thinking or acting is not the way that they go about it. And so I kind of felt that way after leaving school, a year into leaving school, graduating, and realizing, wow, like the things that I learned in school have only so much relevance in the world outside of school. And I think that remedying that is extremely important, whether it's actively going out and engaging with people and kind of crossing that bridge and the humility that comes with that and recognizing that, well, I know things a certain way, maybe in a valuable way, and an interesting way, and you know things in another way. But also bringing those people into the school, into class. And I'll try to be quick, but a good example is when I was in design, maybe you took this course, there's a course where students were asked to design for different shelters, homeless shelters in Montreal. And we all went about this a bit, maybe in a bit of a savioristic mentality of, we're gonna make collapsible backpacks for them and things like that. And recently we've been engaging with a very interesting social worker in Milton Park who has such his ambition is to kind of remedy those blind spots of people who care, but who are sort of removed from the world of social work and intervention. And I think it would be fantastic to bring him and actually take students onto the street and walk around with them, whereas we went and we interviewed someone at a shelter, that only for one day, a few hours. And I think that it's these types of experiences that on campus and outside of campus, there has to be more back and forth and interplay, because if not, we're just, then that's the echo chamber, really. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you. Did you want to say something, Maddie?
Yeah. Yes, I couldn't agree more. It's the field trip, that I think is so lost. And I think back on like field trips that I went on, like elementary school. I don't even really think they were a thing by high school. What happened to those? Like incredibly memorable experiences that were like transformative and like just be like a day, but it makes such a difference. So yeah, just looking at this question, what can we do to step outside and get our hands dirty? Like the answer is in the question, like step outside, get your hands dirty, like literally get involved. Like don't wait for people to come to you, show up places, go talk to people. It's scary, do it anyways, like I don't know, what do you have to do to be able to feel okay in doing that? Then do it. Like, I don't know, step outside, like step outside of your normal frame, make the effort, like let other people change you.
Very well put.
I think it comes back, like, I don't know, we're harping on this chord a lot, but it does come back to the fear of making mistakes, fear, like that ties in with humility too. Like to be humble is to like make yourself vulnerable, in front of other people that know more, know different things than you, and it's much more comfortable to remain in the microcosm. So to me, this question is not just about not just about academia, it's about anywhere, really. Like my own friend group, like my neighborhood, And so what can we do to step out? Yes, the answer is to step outside and get our hands dirty. But the question really is, what can we do to step outside and get our hands dirty? And that's a really, really, really hard question, I think, because it's hard. Like, we're here, it's just easier to just be here. It takes like a certain extra energy and extra motivation to get out. So I actually don't have like an answer for this question.
That's great. I don't think we needed. Oh well, Thomas has the
Gabe
answer.
just has empathy. That's what he brings.
Just has empathy. We're going to hear from Cassandra before we move on.
Yeah, I'm wondering too whether, and those are all amazing thoughts, but I'm wondering too if there's a way for us to prevent the homogeneity from within, to stop it from getting to that point. Whether whether we can create space for a lot of different perspectives on the same topic, without ostracizing or making it difficult for those points of view to develop and to be taken seriously. I'm thinking, this is maybe a very broad example, but I'm thinking of someone like Robin Wall Kimmerer, who, is a scientist and a member of the Potawatomi Nation and author of a book that I'm sure many of us here have read called Grading Sweetgrass, and how she was, studying ecology and biology and feeling like she had to force herself into that framework, force herself into that model in order to be a scientist, and completely removed from all of her more community-based indigenous worldviews about the issues that she was studying as a scientist. And later she ended up bringing this into her work, and it completely revolutionized the topic of biology and ecology for so many people. So I wonder if we could just make it so that people feel more comfortable and are encouraged to bring these more innovative and less conventional viewpoints to the table, maybe we don't need to even have this homogeneity at all.
Donna?
Yeah, one of the things I've practiced and have seen a lot of other people practice too, is sort of bringing their practice, whatever it is that they are doing, whatever aspect of their particular practice, out into public space, into public places. And that can be very subtle. It can not necessarily be something that is possible to end in a catastrophe or some sort of failure where it doesn't happen, because it can't not happen. Like what you're, I've worked in collaboration before on paper making, and it's part of the exhibition. Not the paper making that I did at that time, but just learning paper making. And we brought that out into public space and opened it to people to just join us. And, what were their ways of doing this, and what histories did they have with that? So we had a boundary object, and we were willing to, just sort of open some sort of practice, but that could also be a conversation. We have conversations in our labs, our offices, and bringing that out into a public place where more than the chairs that we're sitting on are provided, and people can just come in, offer an opinion if they have it. I think that there's a real value in that impromptu and sort of open offer of opinion.
That's very interesting. Kind of like catering to like a candid nature,
Yeah.
And people feel more comfortable almost in these settings. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add on Lamontagne's with the braided sweetgrass book. I mean, that's an amazing book. What's really great about it is she's in the academic, but she's also trying to speak to her community at the same time. And I mean, there's a book by Margaret Kovac called Indigenous Research and Methodologies that I invite everybody to read at least once, even a little blurb. It talks about how we have to make things community oriented so that everybody can understand you. I use a language that's no academic. Make sure that from a 10-year-old to an elder, they understand what you're saying. Because if not, you are being a gatekeeper. You are being the one that's like not opening up the communications. We are here as maybe academics or activists, artists. We're the one opening the doors. Hopefully we could keep them open as well. But we have to be on the forefront of not just trying to figure out ways of doing so, but asking questions to the people that are in front of us to see how they would do it as well. And I think that's what we lack in academia. We always go back to reading and writing and talking amongst our peers. I like it, but sometimes you have to go outside yourself, make a fire and drink some tea and see what happens.
That's it, yeah. And again, we're coming back to language, as you had said earlier, a source of sharing. And Ursula, I think you had said a source of power. Maddie, you said a source of wayfinding. I'd like to move on. We're going to open up for audience questions and hopefully have some more great dialogue. Until then, I just wanted to do our next group activity. This one's called Mix and Match. And you know, we're super behind schedule, so I'm going to make it real short. I was going to pair up a panelist with someone else's big goal for Concordia sustainability and get their take on it. But I think there's really only one we need to talk about, which is divestment and carbon neutrality. So I don't know how to do this. Oh no, wait, I need to go back. Yeah, there we go. I think maybe we can all give our take on what Concordia transitioning to carbon neutrality and transitioning to divestment are the two mutually exclusive, you know. But let's all take 30 seconds each to talk about it, and I'll have a timer. Yeah, we can start with you because you opened it up. Just let me get my timer going.
Fair enough.
30 seconds. Did you say ridiculous?
You said 3 seconds.
No, 30 seconds. 3 seconds would be ridiculous. Yeah. Okay, 30 seconds, let's go.
I don't know much about where Divest Concordia, that whole movement, is at these days. I've heard a lot about it, but to me it's major because you know, we can really like focus our energies efficiently by attacking like really big, I don't know how to say it, like capital, like
right.
The amount of money, the amount of power that's behind Concordia University.
5 seconds.
That if we take the reins of that, huge impact.
Great. Okay. Also, just want to say I'm focusing on these two not as a means to discount anyone else's big sustainable goal, but maybe this is one where it's like there's a lot to unpack here right now. So, okay, let's move forward. You're on.
Okay, yeah, same deal. I'm not super up to date on where either of those movements are at, but I agree, especially with Divest. I have a little bit more knowledge on that it is potentially such a powerful leverage point. It's like there's a ripple effect that comes from that, and it kind of really is the only way for you to take on an entity as large, like entities that large, right? And I would connect it to like quitting RBC and similar campaigns to just pull the rug out from underneath them.
Okay. Is this a good exercise? Are we? I don't really know what we're doing here, but maybe it's. 30 seconds, I always feel like having these exercises where, you know, sometimes if something's really wrong with me, I need to talk to someone else about it before I can move through it, because when I talk to someone else, what I'm doing, what my mind is doing, is distilling a problem that might be very complex into a very simple way. And maybe this again comes back to language, right? So if you only have 30 seconds to talk about divestment and what that would look like, we would love to hear it. I'll also give people the chance to opt out if they want, but we'd love to hear from you.
Ready?
Yes.
I think I'm going to take an approach where I'm just going to say what comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people probably are familiar with what divest is, as well as carbon neutrality, but my mind first goes to to corporate power and everything that represents, and how our economy broadly is kind of centering that power and supporting it through lots of means, including like violence against specific communities and blah, blah. Yeah, so to me it's also very important and speaks to the power of money, speaks to the power of our sort of past the time.
You're way past.
Yeah. Those are my thoughts.
Maybe I should have a buzzer or something. Okay, now let's move on. Oh, we're ready when you are. Oh no, you still have 14 seconds left. 8 seconds.
Bring change, don't be scared. Ask questions.
All right. All right. Ursula, you're up.
All right, I think it's totally complementary. So divesting for me means not putting your money into dirty fossil fuels, for example, amongst others. And the carbon neutrality is something you need to do on site. So, and that requires a lot of money. We're talking about 100 to 200 million to get Concordia really zero carbon and not just greenwashing. So
you've got 5 seconds left.
The money needs to be redirected to get things right on our own place, and that's complementary.
Great. Thank you everyone for embarking on this exercise with me. We're going to hear from the people online. Actually, we can hear from Kara right now. Kara, you've only got 30 seconds. Are you ready?
Yes, and I also have 7 minutes before having to the class.
Oh, that's true. He has to leave to go teach, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll hear from you, and your timer's starting now.
Okay, so I mean, one of the things that I think most people know about Concordia is that they did make the divestment commitment a few years ago, saying that they're going to go to 0%, and 0% of their investments are going to be on fossil fuels and things like that. And the other metric was the impact investment, which is essentially putting money or investing money in companies that make positive impact. And Concordia does give a few updates every once in a while, and to talk about everything but those two metrics.
Right,
and so
okay.
I think I would like to wait to hear somebody actually gives where we're at, like how much Concordia actually invested in fossil fuels at the time they made the commitment, how much it is right now. And since
way past 30 seconds, unfortunately.
Yes, I'm going to shut up. Sorry.
I should have done it with a buzzer, but I don't want to be a buzzer person. I'd rather just kind of let it run. Okay, thank you. How about Cassandra?
Yeah, as Carl said, Concordia has committed to full divestment of its endowment fund from fossil fuels, oil and gas by 2025 as part of the climate plan. I think Ursula was very right too in saying that we need to think about reducing our emissions, and if we're going to become neutral, do that in a meaningful way that just doesn't involve buying offsets. And so the climate plan also seeks to reduce our emissions from our operations as much as possible by 2040 before taking that carbon neutrality option.
Great, thank you. And how about Donna? Whenever you're ready.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, it's really the redirection of funds. My biggest concern about that is in unproven offsets for carbon offsets. So that's something that when you're redirecting money into real something that's really going to make a difference, and sort of carbon offsets have often been shown to sometimes cause problems as well. So they have to be really well understood and supported by the institutions that invest in them if they're going to invest in them.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. I'm such a lenient moderator right now. Okay, Thomas and then Rebecca.
I'm going to save you some time. I don't know enough about the subject, so I'll pass it right on.
Okay. That was actually that was the shortest answer we've had so far. So thank you for helping to even the keel of this. Okay, Rebecca, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so first point, not just carbon, right? That's not the only reason we're here. It's not just carbon. Donna, I have to support also your point about the potential dangers of offsets. We have to look seriously at who is bearing the burden of our offsets and make sure that we are not just continuing to emit at the cost of somebody else's lifestyle and life choices and options. That's
great.
It for me.
And you know what? That was only 26 seconds. Can you pop that back on there? Okay, with that being said, thanks everyone for coming along here for the ride, and all those in the audience. This felt really special. It was really nice to listen in and just be, there's a fly somewhere in this room, but also I've become the fly on the wall. And thanks for letting me chime in. Again, big thanks to the whole team at In.Site and everyone at the Fourth Space. I'd like to open up the floor for some audience participation. If anyone has any questions, maybe we'll take 5-10 minutes. Claire? We'll have to give you a mic here.
Thank you.
Claire, why don't you introduce yourself first? Because,
all right, sure.
Yeah.
Hi, I didn't get a chance to meet everybody, but I'm Claire. I'm part of the organizing team of this event. So I just want to start by saying thank you so much for being here and participating in this. Putting on an event is admittedly something that none of us have done before. So thank you for being part of this experiment. It's really appreciated. And we are really all very passionate about this subject, and this is a symposium on sustainability across the fine arts. So I got to plug the fine arts and ask a question related to that. I know that not everybody here is an artist, or however you want to classify that, but I'm just as interested to hear this answer from those who are in a completely other field, which is why we invited you. But I would like to hear from anybody about what your thoughts are on what does sustainability look like in the fine arts, and what does it mean to be a fine artist, considering issues of social, cultural, and environmental sustainability in the fine arts, and considering blind spots there. I'd just love to hear from anybody about that.
Carolus has his hand up, so we'll hear from him first because he also has to leave in 40 seconds.
Yes, so I'm gonna speak and run away. Sorry, I'm not being rude, but I really appreciate being included in this, and thank you for all your work. So on that question, so we just hired an intern from the fine arts faculty who's studying in painting and drawing, and it's really nice to have having no sense of art whatsoever myself. It's really nice to have somebody on the team who does, and it's enable us to actually communicate our mission and our values via design and via all these things. One of the things we look at is what does the person have in terms of knowledge and appreciation of the climate and sustainability. And it's something that's needed to be integrated more formally in the training of all students, which goes back to the big campus goal here, or big goal for the campus. So there are only 19% of students at Concordia that have any mention of sustainability in their curriculum, and the national average is 37%. And within fine arts, arts itself has played a big role in helping society navigate and explore big issues, and there's no bigger issues right now than those of sustainability and the climate crisis. And so I would really encourage the faculty to integrate more formal training on the climate crisis and sustainability in curriculum. And I did count, at Concordia, there are over 200 professors who do research sustainability within their own work. And they don't only span the 4 faculties, they span almost every department at Concordia. And I counted 20 of them in the fine arts. So there are the expertise there, and there's a pressing need and a pressing demand for it. And so I just encourage you to make sure it's more included in curriculum. And with that, I'm gonna run. Thank you so much for including me, and thank you for putting this event together.
Goodbye, Carolus. Thank you. And I think also you've got it figured out? Okay, we've got 10 minutes.
I can also speak to this question. I think there's a lot of things that people in the arts can do with regards to sustainability. I think there's a lot of stuff that maybe the mind goes quickly to, like materiality based, but I want to come back to something that somebody said in terms of basically being able to have permission, I guess, to be different, have permission to break outside the usual disciplinary bounds. I really think that the arts is the place where you have permission to do that. Nobody expects you to follow along a certain doctrine or be necessarily building on some long lineage of scholarly thought or technique. You can just do whatever. And I think there's a lot of power in that when it comes to experimentation and trying new things. And, like I was saying earlier about having something that catches you when you fall, that's it, I'm just a creative person doing my thing. Like, I'm just playing. Like, it's, and if you take it really seriously, you start to see some sort of truth, or it speaks to you, then it's doing its job without the baggage, I would say. So I think there's, yeah, that's one thing. I think there's a lot of things that artists can do on this topic.
I think we're going to hear from Rebecca first, because they just put their hand up first.
Thanks. Sorry, I'll be quick. I'm
You have
a
30
biologist.
seconds.
30 seconds.
No, you don't. You don't.
I'm a biologist. I'm not I'm not an artist. At the college, about 10 to 15% of our students are minoring in sustainability studies are fine arts students. We need the arts to reach people. Desperately, we need the arts to reach people. As a scientist, I can do all the studies and as the engineers, we can come up with technological solutions. Without the arts, we can't reach people. So sustainable practice, obviously, this is not something that I know about so much because I'm not an artist, but we need for artists to be able to help communicate and reach people, because we've kind of reached the limit ourselves of who we can reach. It's really crucial. So anyone who's in the arts, want to study sustainability, come see me.
Yeah, I mean, I totally on that point. I think, yes, you have the freedom to do what you want, but I think you would also have the responsibility to sort of disrupt more in the other faculties. I mean, I think the problem is it's a lot of well-minded people, but they are pretty much amongst themselves, and it needs to become much more mainstream, and it needs to go into every single department, every single faculty. And I think if you could do that, I mean, we need to bring all these sustainability initiatives more together, that there's more of a community and not just the artists in their own little ecosystem. But I think if you can get somebody in whatever, in aerospace engineering to become more sustainable would be great. I mean, we need to think of methods of interventions that could make that happen. And that I think then things could really change.
Mm-hmm. And Donna?
Yeah, this is very much something that that really grew in my practice as an artist, being involved in technology and electronics and big installations, and seeing in the arts how much consumption of materials that there was. And at the end of a semester, let's say, so much, or the end of an exhibition, things aren't always packed up and saved or kept. Sometimes they have to be stored for very long periods of time or thrown away. And the consumption of materials was something that was really problematic for me. And I spent a lot of years in my practice working on that, reclaiming materials, using recycled or actually reclaimed materials, and reusing a lot of materials. And that has over time transitioned into actually working, as you're saying, in laboratories, in engineering laboratory, in biology laboratory, with scientists on, how can we bring these ideas and thoughts together, like that we are like-minded, but how can we work on particular projects and bring those to the public? So it's that collaboration, that where it really becomes transdisciplinary, and we're working across the arts and sciences and really bringing that out with the goal and intention of working with stakeholders and other investments in the public space is really important. Yeah.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who has another question?
Well, I have a comment.
Oh, perfect.
Real quick. I did a residency at Emily Carr about 2 years ago, like right when the COVID started. So I could only use means like that were close to me. So again, I was in the cottage. What I use is actually garbage. I went to the dump and I used all of that to make all my art pieces. And I had so much fun because I was outside my comfort zone. Never seen anybody else do it. There's maybe Yoar Yuango, he's a Sami artist. Brian Youngin uses recyclable material and makes these really big, he made a whale out of like plastic chairs. Anyways, I mean, also, or either be really minimalist, but I would make these sculptures at the dump, and then people at the dump would see them, and this 1,000-person community we're asking like, who did this, who's doing this? So it brought like conversation and like just things we disregard, and you can learn a lot about people's garbage. So that I'm just saying.
We might have time for one more question. Yep, Manny, I'll get you a microphone.
Hi, hello. Thank you again for this wonderful panel. I think it was pretty enlightening. And I just had a kind of simple question. Just as it's hard to define what sustainability is, right? Much in regards to defining what design or art is, right? But I believe that education and sustainability should be done, you know, at a younger age, for sure. But to do so, it might need to be set in more practical terms, right? So I just want to ask you and everyone, what do you think that would look like to make sustainability more practical in, like, let's say, an elementary school setting or something?
So from a like pedagogical, how to, okay.
In terms of education.
Great question. Maya, go ahead.
I don't know if this answers it exactly, but the first thing that comes to mind, again, on the note of like getting out and experiencing things and how much that transforms a worldview, the first thing that comes to mind is like nature connection and like the entire world that's there. There's a lot of schools that exist for like very young kids, but I think at least for me, and I think for a lot of people, like really, really feeling it in a personal way, like the importance of sustainability and ecology and like caring for our earth comes from like actual relationships to the things that are around you. Like that's where care comes from, is building relationships. I think that's like a very big topic in and of itself, but a lot of us have no idea what's around us, like have no idea what the plants are around us, the animals, like how the ecosystems around us work. And I think starting that at a very early age is really special. Like that's definitely world transforming for people. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Great. I think we'll hear from Cassandra.
Yeah, those are really nice points. I also, earlier someone noted, I think it was Carol, something about toxic positivity. And it's difficult because with children, you don't want to scare them. You don't want to make them feel hopeless or depressed, but you want them to know and to feel empowered to do something. So I think balancing those elements in a way that children do end up feeling empowered and feeling excited about what they can do instead of totally hopeless about what they can't. But then balancing that with, as they get older, starting to bring less simplicity into it. Like I think at the high school level, it's really important to start recognizing the systems level issues that we're facing here. And I was a kid in the 90s. I grew up, no litter bugging, recycling, but as you get older, you need to recognize that there are really massive systems at work here, that it's not on our response, like individual shoulders, to solve this through our recycling habits. And moreover, that this issue, this climate crisis, sustainability crisis, it intersects with other systemic issues, right? Facing so many different communities. And those are the communities who are actually most impacted by climate change and by sustainability crises as well. So this is something that to me, I only started learning about, I would say, relatively recently in my life. And I think is absolutely crucial, for kids to start learning about when they come of an age that it makes sense and is appropriate. I'm sorry, my voice is gone.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have multiple children. And I would say at the youngest age, they're building the relationships and the connections are crucial. To start with an ethic, right? To start with the values, but also as children grow, they are more susceptible to climate anxiety, to eco-anxiety than we are. They really are, and it can be absolutely debilitating for adults, certainly for children who are inheriting this earth that we're leaving for them. And so that those connections that they build with other communities as well, with other human communities, and with the natural world or the non-human world, are crucial as sources of inspiration, also as potentially ways to care for themselves as they move forward and as we hopefully empower them to make change. But they do need to be able to, go back and appreciate a bird song or hug a tree or whatever it is that makes them feel better, so that when they are convinced that the human race is going extinct and are crying for the for the dolphins and the whales, they know how to take care of themselves as well. We have some great programs here in Montreal, the Coyote programs. Shout out to Coyote Camp and Dr. Kat at my kids' school is doing great stuff. And there are a lot of wonderful, wonderful people who understand all of that and are doing really great things. But we need to equip them with self-care and with the connections to take care of themselves, as well as with the knowledge and the power.
Great, very well put. We'll hear from Maddie first, and then Thomas.
Go ahead.
I just have a quick point. It just reminds me of a conversation I had with a friend recently, and we were talking about, she's about to have a child, and we were talking about parenting and what's your role as a parent. And she brought up the point that your role is to, when you have a child, is to create an elder. And that really stuck. And I feel like when it comes to sustainability, the climate crisis, all of this, it's thinking what will this child need as an elder to live in that world and to bring something positive to it. So.
I just want to ask if anybody's heard of the book Deschooling Society, because it kind of jumped to mind. It's kind of like a critique. Is that a hand? Great. Yeah, it's a critique of like schooling and education and even the idea of like childhood. I think there's a link between how schooling is approached and like consumerism. Like children are kind of like trained into this like consumerist mindset from a very young age. They are, their agency is taken away from them, and they're taught to kind of like be constantly appealing to this authority figure. Can I please go to the bathroom? It's like, it's insidious, and we don't really question it because we just think education equals good. And it's just kind of like a strong cultural value, yet what is being lost? And there's like a lot of places still that don't organize, that don't educate people at all in the same way, and might not even like the concept of childhood. Well, the writer Ivan Illich spent a lot of time, I think, in Mexico, and like the concept of childhood is like really different there. So I just want to like highlight the fact that like we're talking about sustainability and education and getting kids out onto the land, and I think these are really important currents of thought. But I think a lesser thought through one is like, what about people's sense of agency? And maybe this is one that we could bring to kids at a younger age without triggering that eco-anxiety, right? Like just empowering them to feel like they can get involved and can do things, and that they don't have to ask for permission, and they don't have to go through the right program, and they don't have to have all the knowledge, and they can be like active agents in the world, acting on whatever they happen to care about.
Okay. Sebastien, we'll hear from you. You're going to take us home because it's 4
Okay.
o'clock here.
All right. I mean, sorry, I always go back to my culture because it's a set of values, and I was really intrigued. It's something that you'd show your children, right? And the fact that we treat children as elders, I think I can really relate to that, and how we should treat children as they start being very young. In Cree cultures, we see everything 7 generations forward. So if we impact 7 generations forward, what is it that we're doing? So we're all responsible to a certain extent towards our future as soon as you're born. That being said, I mean, like my community, we're okay, but there's some communities where children don't have any like running water, they don't have any drinking water. And I mean, that's trauma right there, right now. And I think we're thinking about things that might happen in our future here, let's say in Montreal, in these different kind of contexts. Not trying to say one is worse or suffering more than the other, but right here within Canada, we take all the reserves and make it one country, we're looking at a country en développement, in development. I think there's a word that there's a sense of urgency and agency, I think, that needs to be put on the foreground more so than this notion of like these possibilities at this point. Mm-hmm. And I think that our children we're gonna learn from them. We're gonna live their anxiety. We should make, like, I don't know if we should make more of them, but I mean, there will be our future. Where are their elders? In Cree culture, children are very important. Elders are very important. People of our age. I don't see any elders. No, I don't see any other. We're like the stupid ones. So we're the ones that are making the mistakes. So we have to learn and teach from top to bottom. So that's where we situate ourselves. No hierarchy within Cree culture. It's very circular. When you're giving this would be like a talking stick. It means you have the time to say what you need to say in a very timely fashion. Speak from the gut, speak from what is really profound. And I mean, continue asking questions and continuing this, because I mean, it needs to happen. And hopefully non-Indigenous kids and Indigenous kids can meet up at some point and see where we can relate and find a rapport to continue this in a positive way.
Let's all just take a moment and exhale on the past 2 hours and think about everything that we've just heard. But I'd like to extend a huge thank you to everyone online and in person for being a part of this today. It was very special. Everyone in the audience, the whole team from In.Site, everyone at the fourth space. So let's give one last round of applause for everybody.
And maybe Patricio, I'll thank you for that stellar moderation and bringing all these folks together. All right, folks, if you've just joined the Zoom, because you're here for a conversation between Kelly Jasbach and Juan Ortiz-Apuey, you're in the right place. We're going to keep the Zoom going for the next conversation. So I'll invite our panelists here to please clear the green so we can set up a couple tables for our next guest, but hang around, have some coffee. And folks on Zoom, if you need to go, bye. Thank you so much for being here. Those of you who have joined us, welcome in. We're going to take a slight pause just to set the next conversation up, and stay where you are. If you want to stick around, we'll get going in a few minutes. Thank you.